Hey everyone, and welcome back to Rank and File Sports. And today we're going to be hopping right back into our series where we are predicting every single Power 4 team's record by the start of the college football season. And Tennessee is going to be a pretty interesting team in the SEC this year. They definitely have some high potential with Nico Iamaleava at quarterback. He showed some flashes against a very stingy Iowa defense last year. And just overall, they have the potential to have some high offensive firepower like they have in past years. So they're definitely going to be a fun team to watch. Taking a look at the Vols' schedule, they start off the season with the piece of cake game against Chattanooga. That one won't be a problem. Before that, basically road trip against NC State at Bank of America Stadium. That game is going to be very interesting. I think both of these teams are going to be pretty good. Not quite conference champion level, but I think they're going to finish around the same place in their conferences. So it's going to be a really good early test of SEC versus ACC and just a really fun matchup to watch in general. The Kent State game is another non conference one, it isn't one to worry about. And then they hop into SEC play with a road trip to Oklahoma. That game is going to be very interesting. The potential for a lot of offensive fireworks. Going to be a very fun game for sure. Then they have a bye week before a road trip to Arkansas. That one's not as much of an issue, I don't think. The Razorbacks will be all right, but a team like Tennessee most likely will be able to win at Arkansas. The home game against Florida, Florida's going to be okay also, I think. But, Tennessee has lost some games that they shouldn't in the past. So it's maybe one to watch out for, especially with Alabama coming up the next week. But overall, not too bad. That Alabama game I do think is going to be extremely difficult. Even though Alabama lost Nick Saban, they have a very talented roster, and I think Kalen DeBoer is a very capable head coach. So that'll be a tough game to win, even though they're at home. Then they have their second bye week before that home matchup against Kentucky. I do think Kentucky's going to be all right this year. We had them as one of the teams that we considered for the near the bottom of our top 25. So I do think Kentucky will be a good team, but on the road it's going to be tough for them to win. Mississippi State, not quite as good as Kentucky, so a little bit better chance for Tennessee there. I think I like the Vols in both of these games. The road trip to Georgia is most likely going to be a loss. I think it's really going to be difficult for Tennessee to win this one. They're going to need some big injuries for Georgia for that to be possible. Then the last non-conference game of the year in UTEP, and probably the easiest finish to the season possible with a road trip to Vanderbilt. Tennessee has a total of 7 home games and 4 away games, along with that neutral site game at Bank of America against NC State. And they face a total of 4 of our top 25 opponents in the rank and file poll, and have an overall schedule difficulty of 8 out of 10.
Looking here at the Tennessee Vols guaranteed wins for the 2024 college football season, we start off with Chattanooga, Kent State, and UTEP. Tennessee has a pretty weak non-conference schedule aside from a matchup against NC State, which will feature quarterbacks Nico Iamaleava and Grayson McCall for Tennessee and NC State, respectively. None of these three games featuring the Chattanooga Mocs, the Kent State Golden Flashes, and the UTEP Miners should be close. And then Vandy is a perennial doormat in the SEC. Really sad to see Vandy always a perennial cellar dweller, but maybe they'll be able to build on a slight momentum from the 2022 season, despite the fact that they took a step back in 2023. Maybe Clark Lee is their guy. Who knows? Maybe this year Vandy will surprise people, but we don't see that as a remote possibility, even against the Tennessee Vols. Moving on to the likely wins, we have Arkansas, Florida, Kentucky, and Mississippi State. All four of these teams have something in common. They're all down. Florida especially has been down for quite some time, but Arkansas when quarterback KJ Jefferson was there, they were pretty good. They were competing in the SEC West. This was a time when the SEC West still had their divisions. But this is a make or break year for Coach Sam Pittman, and if it doesn't go well, we could see him being fired at the end of the year. For Florida, same scenario. Billy Napier in a make or break season, faced with a gauntlet of a schedule, but he does have some hope with quarterback Graham Mertz, who did show some promise last year as the Gators starter. But neither Arkansas nor Florida are going to be competitive against a Tennessee team that is loaded on offense like always, and the defense looks like it can hold its own, at least in our eyes. So moving on to Kentucky and Mississippi State. Kentucky's quarterback Will Levis is now in the NFL, and he actually has been for a full season now. So Kentucky, we noticed a drop-off with them last year. We expect that to continue this year, although it's very, very possible, if not likely, that the Cats will be in another bowl game. Coach Stoops has done a phenomenal job as head coach of these Wildcats, and we don't expect him to lose his job with Kentucky anytime soon unless he himself decides to leave on his own terms. As far as Mississippi State, Coach Arnett only made it through a portion of last season before being fired after Coach Leach's tragic death. So Mississippi State is a program in turmoil right now. We just don't see them as competing with the Vols really at all, but maybe in a couple years, because they have shown, over the past 10-15 years that they are a respectable SEC program. They are competitive, and you can expect them to be a bowl team most years. This year just isn't most years for them, unfortunately. So we have the Vols winning this one as well pretty handily. As far as the toss-ups are concerned for these Tennessee Vols, we have NC State and Oklahoma. NC State, we expect, is going to be a player in the ACC this year. They're in the upper echelon of that conference for sure, and as a result, a dark horse playoff contender. This game is in Charlotte, a neutral site, and a lot of people are going to be picking Tennessee in this game, and they may have a slight advantage since Iamaleava has a little bit more experience in the system, in Josh Heupel's system. But we just think NC State is such a well-rounded team, and Grayson McCall's experience, despite the fact that he hasn't been quarterback at NC State, he was at Coastal Carolina. He is still a very experienced player, and we think that that's going to play a key role in NC State's chances of winning. So we feel pretty comfortable with NC State winning in a very close game that could prove to be the game of the year, despite the fact that this game isn't a traditional rivalry like, OU, Texas, Michigan, Ohio State. It doesn't have the allure of these games, but when it's all said and done, it could come down to be one of the top 3 games of the year when it's played. As for Oklahoma, we also have the Sooners beating the Vols in a very close game. We think that home field advantage for Oklahoma is going to be crucial. This is a make or break year for Brent Venables as he moves his Sooners into the SEC. They have a very tough schedule this year, facing Alabama and LSU among other strong opponents. And we think that this game is going to, since it's early, determine a lot for OU's trajectory this season. This could either start a snowball effect where they start losing a few games they shouldn't, or it could be a start of something really great. But either way, we have the Sooners winning in a very, very close one. Some people may pick Tennessee. We got to roll with the Sooners at home. Finally, we have the likely losses for these Vols. We have Alabama and Georgia, the usual suspects for these Tennessee Volunteers. Especially over the last 20 years, Tennessee has really struggled to beat Alabama, and Georgia they've had a harder time with as well. We just don't think that Tennessee has the firepower they did in 2022 to take down Alabama at home again in 2024, despite the fact that the Tide are ushering in a new era with Coach Kalen DeBoer. With Georgia, if you remember, Tennessee in 2022, during the first college football playoff rankings release, they were ranked number 1, and that week they traveled down to Athens, and they did not put up a good fight. This team is, while it's good in 2024, we expect them to be, this isn't the team that was in 2022, and if they couldn't put up a good fight in Athens against Georgia then it's hard to expect that they will this year. So we have the Dogs winning pretty easily, despite the fact that we do think the Vols will have a successful season.
Moving on to the schedule recap, we do have Chattanooga as a pretty obvious win to start the year for Tennessee. There's just no way they lose to an FCS school. The NC State game, I do believe that Tennessee loses. That game is in North Carolina at Bank of America Stadium, so NC State does have most likely some home field advantage there. I think it's going to be really close, but I just have the Wolfpack as slight favorites, and I'm going to go ahead and pick them in that game. The Kent State game at home shouldn't be much of an issue at all. That'll be a great game for Tennessee to score a lot of points. Now, the road trip to Oklahoma, I think that's where they pick up their second loss of the season. That's also going to be a very high offensive power game, but I just don't really see Tennessee being able to win that game. It also depends a lot on Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma has a lot of potential for this season, but if they don't live up to that in the first couple weeks, then Tennessee could definitely win this game. But right now, I'm going to have to go with the home team. After the bye week, I'm not too worried about either of those two games for them, the road trip to Arkansas or the home match against Florida. I think both of those are comfortable wins. However, the home game against Alabama, I do think Tennessee loses. The last time they had Alabama at home, they were able to pull off a massive upset, and their program has been on the rise ever since. But this year, I do think Alabama is a more talented team than Tennessee, and despite the loss of Nick Saban, I just really don't see Alabama losing this game. There's potential for Tennessee to pull off an upset here, but Alabama is going to be the favorites, and I do believe they're going to win. Following their second bye week, the game against Kentucky is one to potentially look out for as an upset, but I just don't think Kentucky's going to be quite good enough to pull off a road win this year. And the same can be said for Mississippi State. However, I am less confident in Mississippi State pulling off an upset. I do think Tennessee is going to be good enough to win that game for sure. And then we have the road trip to Georgia. Now, even when Tennessee was potentially contending for a playoff spot and ranked in the top 4, they did stand a chance against Georgia. So I really don't see them going to Georgia and winning that game. It just seems incredibly unlikely because Tennessee is not as good as they were a couple years ago. So I just can't see them winning that game at Georgia. We have to give them their 4th loss of the season there. However, they should easily finish the year with 2 more wins because the games against UTEP and Vanderbilt are 2 of their easiest games of the season. So that puts Tennessee at 8-4, and they have a projected record of 8.45 and 3.55. So FPI actually has them at 8.6 and 3.4. So pretty similar to what we have, somewhere in between that 3 to 4 loss range. I do think it's possible that Tennessee is able to finish 9-3. I would have them probably beating NC State instead of Oklahoma. But again, like I was talking about with Oklahoma, that really does depend on if Oklahoma is able to live up to the expectations that we have for them. And then we have Tennessee at a 36.9% chance to make the playoffs per FPI, and their national championship percentage is sitting at 2.7. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video tomorrow.